Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to discuss a little bit because I haven't put any content. I know I just want to share some of my research and kind of say because yeah. Also, fun fact. I don't know if this is with all Teslas. Oh, sorry, you're looking at the sun. But as you can see on the rear view panel, um, they actually use gold contacts, gold wiring for the heating thing. I don't know. I thought that was pretty neat. Oh, now I have to reframe my shot. Hopefully that's correct. How did it? But yeah, I thought that was pretty neat to like check out. I guess when the paint fades, it'll be all gold. Because yeah, it's just like a neat little thing, I guess. I don't know. I'm not really thing. And then also, yeah, I changed my title name, just like a little update. Title name to freaking cars, man. I changed gas cars. They make so much sound. Anyway, yeah, I changed my title name to King Camille, because that's my online name, online persona, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I a crusty crab. Anyway, that's where it came from. The alliteration idea. And yeah, so go back to the topic. So we are out here in nice sunny weather. It was so gloomy, but I guess it was supposed to snow, but it didn't snow. So now you see all these salt stuff around. So, you have idiots, people who plant, like, salt can sit in a truck forever. Like, it's salt. It's not food. It's anyway, don't get me started on how we spend public funds in infrastructure and design. Anyway, we shall go to and discuss about some of my research findings with time lapses. Now, am I going to publish publicly entirely? No. As you know, and as most developers know, usually it's we tell, don't show. Now, when they talk about storytelling and stuff, aspect of it, yeah, you want to check my aesthetic or my whatever layout. It's a little bit out of the ordinary, but it's just how I operate things, right? Like, and just like gives you a sense of feeling of like, oh, maybe to understand a bit of the sciencey part of it. I'm not gonna tell you what kind of server stuff I put into the rear. I'm actually trying to find out how to actually take out the speaker, because there's supposed to be a subwoofer in the trunk, but instead, because this is a standard range plus, it doesn't have that. I think it can be retrofitted. I just don't care enough. I mean, it sounds great already. More subwoofer, more woofers, be cooler. But I'm okay with it as is. I'm assuming it would consume less energy anyway. So I want to be as energy efficient. That's my more conscious about driving this car. It's not efficient. It's very inefficient for sure on cold roads. Okay, don't get me started on that. But yeah, so we have a so we have some images, and now, did I fix the timing and did I fix the stretching and stuff? Yes, but I'm not. You can figure that on your own if you purchase a camera. I'm just trying to show you the like the aspects of like shooting open gate and high FPS burst rates. So I've done 60, 30, and then I went from 30 to 24 FPS. You can, well, technically you can do 48, but it's the issue with 48 or 24, like 24 frames per seconds, is that it's too slow and you actually see the motion blur. And it looks like actually, if you watch like JoJo's, for example, or The Matrix, or when you get the slow motion scenes and you actually play it back at a certain slow-mo rate, you can actually see the frames. It's nuts. Like, it's no wonder they did only 8,000th of a second, because I think scientists already like, I think that's good enough, because more of it would cost more energy and more like firepower, more hardware to push the cameras and the light gathering technologies. But when you actually go too fast, I'm not going to show it because, like I said, you can, I think that's for, quality control and how other people perceive information. But when you actually go slow motion, it actually will show you every single frame, but then there's like a ghosting frame. Even if you don't hit it at a certain rate for the timing, shutter timing. And this is like when you have the shutter angle, you capture the light at a different angle, so then it fixes that issue, but then it might skew the truth of light. Yeah, that was a branch or something. It's really windy. And I think that's like the biggest thing, is that when you actually have the capturing motion, you actually see, like, it's not jagged. It's like pure, like, you see the pure like ghosting effect of like light capturing, and it looks so bizarre because it just looks so unreal, because it is unreal. Like, it's better than what our cameras see. But then when you really see, that's the thing too, the way that we perceive information of things that time lapse and videos is not inherently truth. And then it's just like as a person who adapts, for example, if you eat a lot of good food and then you taste this and like, this is kind of mid, you can still proceed to eat it. Some people might spit it out, some people might just throw it away, etc., right? But it might spoil yourself, because then you cannot go back, right? Like, once you start using a global sensor, you just cannot go back, unless it's just to take an ordinary photo, right? But when you want to do more with it, because cameras could be shot on old DSLRs, like, let's be real, the camera it's like the exact same thing, except for the conveniences and maybe the battery life and the video capabilities, of course. But at what cost? That's the real question. And I'm not talking about money costs. I'm talking about like the components, hardware, all that stuff, energy, different type of batteries, etc., lenses. Because, for example, they never even needed to change lenses, right? But they did so because that's the only way they can profit from it. Because if you look at all this, except for a few of this new Sony, they're finally making new camera lenses. Like, there was no 50 to 150 natively on the Sony Minolta system. But if you check the historic timeline of Sony cameras and their lenses, they're just copying a Minolta lens, which a Minolta lens was copying from a previous Minolta batch. And then it just goes going far back, and the more far back you go, the more manual and less technical aspects of the lens manufacturing occurred. And then now you see today, you get some super nice autofocusing lenses, and you don't have to try really hard. But then that defeats the purpose of, like, it might skew your idea of how light is perceived, right? I went back to this. Now, warning, if once you start seeing a lot of global sensor images, your perception of time, I know this is a conspiracy, this is totally conspiracy. I don't know if it's true or not. But when you start to see light differently again, I think there's the stages of how a photographer sees. Um, Now, 0, you have your base, which is that you see it and you're not blind, like legally blind at least. You see regular colors and stuff and your perception. But the issue therein lies that your yellow banana might actually look more pasty, or maybe it looks more uh, warm yellow, because a true yellow banana is like actually warmer color and not a neon yellow, right? At least most bananas. And then as it degrades, as it crystallizes those sugars and those chemical reactions, the yellow, it starts to brown, because that's how sugar, essentially that's just sugar. Um, how sugar processes it, like chemical reactions and stuff, processes, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to, there's too much stuff to understand. And then you see that, like, hey, this is not a yellow banana. This is like a weird looking banana. And the same thing goes with like pineapples. The same thing goes with trees. The same thing goes with leaves. What I like to do is sometimes I like to bite into a leaf to understand the surrounding area's pollution rate without actually, like, because if you think about it, trees can the trees are our protectors, but unfortunately more and more trees are falling down, and it's becoming more difficult for trees to reside in where they exist due to uh, it's anyway. My point is that over time we lose consciousness of what is truth, and global sensors actually brings us back to it. Now, the also caveat is the second phase of your photo journey, is that you begin taking pictures based on aesthetic, right? You see it as 2D objects, so you can understand how it works. And it's just ordinary stuff, right? Like rule of thirds, such like that. And when you go, what is it called? The golden spiral or leading lines, etc., and whatnot. You get to the aspects about how image taking, it can go both ways, where you get the artistic approach and then you get the commercial approach, and then of course you can always blend the two together, but there's a commercial approach where it's just like you take a bunch, and then the artistic approach is where you start manipulating the camera, not the camera, sorry, the images. But of course, that's just definitions of semantics. This is just, you get either artistic approaches and then you get the simple, okay, this is just an object, and you make it as real as possible or something, whatever, etc. And then you get to the third point where you start introducing light as a metric into the camera. And that's just talking about volume, all that, breadth, depth, width, all that fun stuff. When it comes to 3D objects of materialized goods, so things that exist with image taking. And this is talking about just regular humans, I'm not talking about like taking photos of planets and stars and such. That's like a niche kind of camera. Of course, they use the same technologies at a much bigger scale. Anyway, then we have what I like to call is what you call the imaginary photography, whereas you don't even need the camera, and you can kind of perceive how the image can turn out. It's like having the live viewfinder without the actual live footage. And this is in the sense where once you see things, you cannot unsee it, so it is both a blessing and a curse. You know, you can turn everyday trees into like a beautiful piece of work, or vice versa, make it just really ugly and stuff. But at least you can perceive the emotion within that image. At least, again, this is just conspiracy. This is all my conspiracy, all my nonsense approach of it. Because, again, it all has to do with the perception of light. And then after you hit that point of you see everything as cinema in a sense, or at least you can think of it, and then for some reason your brain just adjusts everything. So then it becomes very like everywhere you can see the cinema in it. So it's like almost like you're in a movie, but you're not actually in a movie, of course. But then it's like inherently, when you start chopping onions, you can inherently know how to use it. Or you can just go ahead and use the mandolin slicer where you know it'll be perfect cut every time. But not all people like myself. I still just use a mandolin and just cut up the onions, like slicing the onions that way, because it's just there's no point in trying to be technical with a knife and cutting onions. You know, I'd rather be doing other things. This is not my hobby, right? I can cook, but that's just not my hobby to cook onions like that. But if you're a chef and you need to be meticulous, you know, 5-star chef or whatever, or you want to impress people, you know, you need to have that knife work. And then it goes to, now this is branching off of the imaginary information of light gathering, is that then you start, I can't tell if it's imagining things or you start seeing, like I said, with that you see in slow motion, when you see enough of that footage, it can rewire your brain. Similar to how if you're blind, for example, a lot of people were blind back then, right? Like they didn't have glasses. So their perception of everything in the world, like this is very modern, right? Within the last few hundred years, people started wearing glasses, right? Like just eye reading glasses, you know, you gotta buy bifocal glasses, parfocal, monocles, all that kind of fun stuff that humans need in order to see clearly. Because if they do not have it, then they're just blind, and they literally limited range of motion. If you're blind, that is like what I call true horrors, is when you lose your senses. Now, there's ways where intrinsically things enhance our senses. So when you go outside and you start hearing real trees, and you start touching real grass, you walk on grass, you touch stuff. Once you start losing these senses, you're losing your sense of smell, your hearing, your sight, your touch, your taste. That's when like true horror occurs, because then you lose your sense of perception of reality. And then there's things such as, and I believe, again, this is a conspiracy, I believe that the global sensors bring back that sense of reality for your eyesight. And it's not in the eyesight of like seeing the technical details of eyesight, but then you begin to understand that light is actually very, very intense, and you start to realize and understand that like it's just the way you see things. It's not that you see things in slow motion, but you become so accustomed to it that it's like, I think it's just crazy. It's just like how back then people had to manually focus, so they had to have a depth perception of like 1 meters, 20 meters, etc. And the only thing they had on them was their telescope or maybe their camera. And the thing is too, you wouldn't even know if you hit that mark at 20 meters away. You won't know till you develop that photo. But developing that photo is going to take you years and years of practice. And it's going to take you, like, the difference between now is that you can now perceive light and depth perception right away. So it almost like trains your brain into thinking, oh, that's 1 meter away. And then, you know, you don't have to be exact, but it's like, so some people can, if they are really into fashion and clothes, they might be into like really like they can do a depth perception of like, oh, this guy, I think he weighs like maybe like 170 pounds, or like, oh, she's like 120 pounds. They can perceptually perceive that because it's trained knowledge, and so it enhanced their sight ability. It's kind of like when you play video games and you have a tree tier and then you unlock that tree tier. Now again, this camera is only bound by some money. I say that, but it's I mean, it's a lot of money, of course. But this camera is only bound by money. So technically, if someone were to mass produce global sensors and mass share the technology, then everyone's perception will be elevated, hopefully. But then there's caveats of that and etc. But anyway, that was a very, very long-winded sentence about conspiracies of light. Now, I will now masquerade that tidbit of long-form information into my time lapses in order to get people clicking. And if they watch through it, so be it. If they do not, whatever, I don't care. Now we will go between a bit of the behind the scenes. Now here we got the paint cleaner, or not paint cleaner, paint detail from my car staining. Now as you can see, yeah, the hardest part, you can see that a little bit of the you can see a little bit of the painting, and you can see the little hairs flowing through the wind. You can see how it's very perfect, that like, oh, you can actually calculate, if you wanted to, you could calculate the speed of the wind using just those wind of hairs. You see what I mean? Like your depth of perception instantly changes, and you can immediately conjure up all the details not said in the photo. And again, these are all photos. I think I shot this at, I don't know if I shot this at 60 or 30. I forgot. But yeah, and you can see out of focus shots, but then you see the real fine details. You see the real fine details on my hands, and you can see the wrinkles, but you can see that it moves. So when you see it move, it's like, yes, you can get a macro lens and have it clear or whatever, but I'm not using a macro lens. Here I am using a, I think I used the 50mm f1.7, and then I stopped it down a bit. But yeah, you can see how much information is stored. I didn't do raw. I think I did HEIF files in this, or was it JPEGs? I forgot. Because again, once you start pumping out thousands of photos, this is roughly about 4,500 something photos. Yeah, once you start pumping out lots and lots of photos, you just want to get a quick turnaround, because you A, don't have the time, and B, you don't have the storage space, because it'll take, to get really good quality, this one was like 20 gigabytes or something, I don't even know. Yeah, 32. Yeah, that's a lot of information. Anyway, we'll go to the next one. This one's my favorite one. This is the nettles. Unfortunately, the nettles got mowed down because I don't know why. People like nettles are great because it's a very hardy wintry plant, or it can live in the winter. And it was next to a river, and it's great for flood control, and also it is a deer and animal repellent. So you have wild animals like deer, but they mowed it down for no reason. And it's a great place where bugs live, like spiders and all that. Like I literally walk back home with a bunch of spiders. Like that's just what happens when you're out and about, right? Is what it is. That's just part of life. But yeah, and I like this because, and then I went down into, um, yeah, and I went down to this, and I really love this shot. This one was only about 400 photos. Yeah. But I really love this quick clip. It's about 15 seconds. But you can see, and I get it very wide, so I did 6,000 by 2552, and it's just really nice to look at. And it's just me on slightly above the nettles, and then I push my camera through it to emulate like how an animal, like a very small animal, would go through it. Of course, a very small animal wouldn't, because even my hands were feeling all those nettles and such. The price you pay for great photography. No pain, no gain, as they say. And I just really enjoy that. I just wanted to share it. And I'm still, this already, like some of these images I already perfected. I did perfect a few, but there's still little tweaks, especially for human movement and all that stuff. I'm not in the mood to calculate it, because then it's like you have to calculate the movement of yourself. It has to be perfect. And it's like, of course, I'm a human, so I can't perfectly go 1/10, 1/60th of a second, range of motion and stuff. And this is the second Nettles one. This one is overlooking. This one's high ISO. I think this one I did at 80 thousandths of a second, but high ISO. I believe the ISO was like at least above 100 something thousand. But for some reason, you don't see the noise as much unless you look into the shadows. But again, it's not discerning, because when we see the noise, we only see one frame of the photo. That's why I say your perception change with noise. And when you look at this image, these series of images, it doesn't look like there's any noise, because it blends well into the background of what's not focused. And then this is, all these were shot on manual focus, because once you do this, you can only shoot manual focus. You cannot shoot autofocus with it, because autofocus won't know what to do in terms of grass. If it's a person, sure. If it's someone running, okay, yes. But when you're talking about it's like not readable objects. It's just objects that don't have just objects that there's no way to focus on something, right? But yeah, I still had to do stuff like bubbles, balloon pop, all that stuff. I'll do that when I have the time to. But yeah, this is just a few of the clips that I took. But as you can see, again, that the noise just blends in well, and it doesn't even look like you're shooting with a camera photos wise. I think that's the craziest part, that these are all photos. And if I had better lighting, etc., better whatever, it would have been much different as well. And you can see that it's like when you see shutter timings of 1 at 80 thousandths of a second versus 1 out of 8,000 for a second, for some reason that's the threshold. I think it's like 12,000 or something of a second to see water droplets. But I think there's only the Minolta 9 did that. And it's a film camera as well. And then typically now mechanical shutters only go 8 thousandths of a second. I don't know if it's lost technology or something, or they just use it for something else. But yeah, that it just looks so cool to see these images. And and then if you stop at any time, you can see a still frame and something will be perfectly in focus. Like, that's the issue with video, is that when you go out of focus and you start moving, people don't, it's like, yes, you won't notice it for the most part, but once you see global sensors, it'll change your perception, and then you'll notice, like, oh, this looks really shaky, the footage, or like, because it just doesn't emulate real life. That's the thing. That's why I loved some of my images, like the one on the beach, for example, that I posted a bit ago. It's just that it just looks so real. It's not that it looks pretty or looks so detailed. It just looks like real, like VR headset quality, but it's like more than that. It just looks real. That's what I'm trying to say with global sensors, is that they're capturing light correctly and like just world like not world otherworldly, but it's just so. But cameras before were otherworldly because it wasn't capturing light correctly. And when you have the whatchamacallit, when you get the camera sensor to absorb light correctly, it changes your perspective about all cameras. That it has become, I know I keep saying this, it's not that it's useless, but it's just not capturing truth anymore. And then you start to understand that, like, oh, if you only see, it's like if you see a magnifying glass, once you see the cork and you see the little specks of life floating around in the cellular membranes of cells and stuff, you just start to understand that, like, oh, there, of course there's a pattern to this, but you don't, it's like an implant in your brain that, like, oh, there's little organisms living everywhere we are. That's just how life is. Just like us. That's just like how life is. They move on, they do its thing. But then you, again, like I said, your perception of life just changes. This is just this is my conspiracy. You know, you don't have to believe me, but the proof is in the pudding, as they say. And this one is my favorite one. It's just clouds. This one's 80 thousandths of a second, super slow motion. And I'll end off on this. Because it's just so beautiful. And then when you actually zoom in, you see the noise. The noise is very high. I did 2000 ISO as well. I like to just do 2000 ISO because that's what they say is the base ISO. I think that's why Sony and all the camera companies, Canon, Fuji, etc., they don't want to explicitly say, because technically is not, like 64,000 is not technically the second base ISO of this camera. There is no such thing, because once you go 2000, and then this camera is different, where if you take an overexposed image where it's bright white, you can actually tone it all the way down and it'll bring back the information. So I don't know how it does it, but the camera actually records brighter than it's supposed to, and then you bring it back down in post. But this is nothing I did in post. But these are just clouds close up. I don't know if anybody has taken this, but these are all at 80 thousandths of a second, 2000 ISO. I think I did 2000 frames, one out of 2000th of a second shutter timing. And again, I think when we bring back and record reality, it'll just change people's perspectives of how light is and such. And it's just so beautiful to look at because it just looks so real. And this isn't a time lapse. No, this is real time light hitting our eyeballs, reflecting the cloud of water vapor and such. And we can see the individual fluffiness, the clumps of the cloud. And this would be great to have as a TV background. I always go to that, but it's like, it goes back to, like, this is just a very nice, like, TV background. You know, you put it in the TV room or in the lobby, and it's just like, just what people can just look at. And I hope of course, this is a gray cloud, so it's a bit stormy in this, but I just believe that, again, this is just my perception, is that when we start seeing light again correctly as is, and not an otherworldly skewed position of it, that's when it goes back. Because the difference between film negatives and digital sensors is that digital sensors have it's a cap. It can record a photo correctly, but it does not record animations or life correctly. And what is animation? It's just life. And yeah, it's again, yeah. If it was a nighttime photo, yeah, it's better to use time lapse. But when it comes to the, you see a bird. It's just so random. But you can, if you want, you can actually track how fast that bird went. And how many frames was that bird in? Let's actually count. There's just so many photos that it's just hard to like. Let's see how many photos that bird was. It's just one bird too. Oh man, it's just. Because it's hard to track time on. Okay, let's. Because I'm not viewing this through. Oh, there it is. Okay. So about 5 to 10 photos. Those 3 birds were in there. But yeah. I'm glad that this sensor tech is available to the consumer market, right? Because if it wasn't, it would change. I think it's not that it's a noticeable change, but it's like driving. It's like driving a gas car and an electric car. They're both cars that will get you from point A to B, but it's the technology behind it is immediately different. And I am on what's to say is that like, oh, it's better to have an electric car. But if you live in the middle of the winter or the desert, yeah, a gas car is still that is today. But it's the same thing back then. Like horses, were better suited on regular land, and then you had a camel, great for the desert. And then we got the snow dogs, right? And stuff. And then we have bulls and oxes to tow and push stuff on the farmland. So it really is just depending on the niche and specified uses of machines. And I don't know. I can see why everyone, whatever. But as a guy with only one camera, yeah, there's no point in having. I'd rather just have this camera, and I feel like again, this is just like. I mean, what else better could it get for a global sensor? Like, other than being smaller? Oh, a tree just fell. Well, I just saw a tree fall in front of me. I mean, it was a dead tree, though. But, yeah, because it's pretty windy today. I see a lot of big trees just swaying around. It's nuts. That's not really a good sign, because that means there's sickness in the soil somewhere. Anyway, what do I have to say? It's crazy too, because I've never seen a tree fall naturally. I don't know if you heard that crash of a tree, but yeah, it is very, very windy today. That's for sure. They say the weather isn't affecting us, but all areas, but it is, whether we like it or not. You know, the winds. Where does the wind blow, as they say? What does the wind know? Anyway, yeah, I hope it's interesting. I don't know. If you don't find it interesting, whatever, click off. But for 40-something minutes, I'm glad you watched it. I'll share more of the stuff, but you know, like the only stuff that I like to share publicly without over watermarks and stuff is just like clouds and stuff like that. You know, normal everyday things. Because yeah, I hope it just brings someone a little bit of joy. Just seeing reality again, right? But yeah, that goes it. This is Camille, testing out.